Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Marnese Live Talkshow, a show where we can talk in an authentic and real way about social issues and life issues in hopes to find action steps to move our respective community and society forward. Tonight, we are starting our Summer Love series. We are going to have a conversation about self-love tonight. So, as we know right now, racism isn't going to end tomorrow. But this doesn't mean that Black people should live in pain. Black people must actively seek ways to bring more self-love and peace to themselves and to the entire Black community. Black people should not perceive themselves as forever submerged in white supremacy. Black people must realize that self-love and liberation comes within, and at any moment you can choose to say yes to taking care of yourself. So tonight we have a phenomenal panel of guests who will talk to us about what self-love is and give us their stories. We have Kristin Ryans, Raynard Meredith, Kamilah Johnson, Kristal Bowman, Dr. Terese Teasley, and Latisha Harris. So let me welcome them all to the Marnese Live Talkshow. So tonight we have a phenomenal...
Hi.
Hello. Welcome to the Marnese Live Talkshow.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. We have a phenomenal panel. And just really quickly, can we all go around? I did introduce you all in the beginning, but just can we go around and let our audience viewers know where you're from, who you are, and tell us what self-love means to you. I'm just gonna get this conversation going.
Okay, so I'll go first. I am Kamilah Johnson. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, born and raised, and still here in the D. I am the executive director and founder of the SASHA Center. SASHA stands for Sexual Assault Services for Holistic Healing and Awareness, where we intentionally work in the African American community with self-identified experiencers of sexual assault, and we do prevention and education programs with men in community who would never do that, who have conversations with the men they know who are at risk. And I'm also the lead relationship safety and management consultant for the National Basketball Association.
Thank you so much, Kalimah, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Busy person. All right.
Well, I can go.
Okay,
I can
Kristal.
go. Oh.
Go ahead, Kristal.
Oh, well, my name is Kristal Bowman. I am from Pontiac, Michigan. And self-love to me is taking care of yourself, making yourself a priority without putting others second best, and not giving them your best self. That's what self-love means to me.
All right.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Kristyn. I am from the Downriver area, and I have experience in the healthcare field. However, I'm a stay-at-home mom, and self-love to me is allowing yourself to be selfish and to be in tune with yourself. And it is a lifestyle. Self-love is a lifestyle completely, and it takes effort to love yourself. So that's what it is for me.
Aww. Thank you so much. All right.
So I can go next. Of course, I am Raynard Meredith. I am a licensed professional counselor. I work at a place called Oakland Family Services in Pontiac, Michigan. I'm an intake clinician there. And then in the evening times, I run my own mental health private practice. For me, self-love is pretty much just honoring and being soulful when it comes to your needs spiritually, physically, and emotionally. To be able to be in tune with those and meet those needs on a consistent basis, as well as being able to be in touch with other people and be able to be like nice and loving and kind to them as you love yourself.
All right.
I'll go next. My name is Terese Teasley. I am the founder of Driven by Purpose LLC, and I am a life coach in the city of Pontiac, born and raised. And so my area of specialty is self-love and self-identity. So what self-love means to me is loving yourself without limits. Whatever you've been through in your past and everything that you experienced in life on your journey, you still learn to love yourself without a cause. And so that's what it means to me.
All right.
And lastly, I'm Latisha Harris in Fresno, California. I am a community organizer, organizing in marginalized and frontline communities. Simply put, self-love to me is prioritizing your well-being and your happiness.
Nice.
Oh, you know what, Marnese? I didn't really say what self-love meant to me. I'm so sorry. But what I really think a part of self-love, especially as it relates to the Black community, is being able to understand that culture cures and history heals, and knowing who you are and where you're from, because you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. And so we spend a lot of time exploring opportunities for survivors and just Black folks in general to learn about the culture. Culture is self-love.
Thank you, and thanks so much for bringing Black people into the conversation, because with white supremacy, anti-Blackness heavily going on right now, and we're internalizing all these traumatic experiences, regardless of the fact if we're experiencing it or not, we're seeing it, right? And it's happening to our people. So we internalize that, and we kind of like maybe possibly take that on and project it out on other people. So I wanted to ask and start that off because what are some examples of the lack of self-love that you have seen in individuals? And Raynard, I want to start with you first.
Absolutely. So some examples of lacking self-love is that I've seen a lot of times people will begin to just overly exert themselves, whether it's physically, emotionally, in their relationships, just even on the job. They'll hear themselves initially say, I'm tired. And before they begin to like rest, they will go well beyond their limits until they are about to give up or even just self-destruct. And it's all because that they just didn't listen to that voice on the inside of them that just let them know where they weren't okay with something, that they were tired or they were feeling fatigued, and they didn't take that break to really just refuel themselves. And so a lot of times when people come into my office, when it's like anxiety, depression, and things like that, that is the first thing that I kind of look at is where might they be overly exerting themselves, and how to bring that back to center for them.
Okay. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. All right.
My niece, I have an answer.
Okay.
I want to say, because I'm in the medical field, so my idea of lack of self-love, especially in the Black community, would be the lack of taking the time to make sure that you're healthy. Black people have been conditioned to self-medicate, to deal with pain and say, well, it's okay. Pain in your body will never equal a positive outcome. Pain means something is wrong, something's going on, it needs to get checked out. And what I've noticed in the Black community is a lot of Black people don't take their health as serious as they should. There's a lot of preventative just appointments that should just be made, and especially with Black men, they don't make them. Right now I'm in the urology field, and Black men have the highest rate of their prostate cancers being untreated and found at the last minute because they don't even just go get a checkout, just a regular checkup. Like, these are things that should be done, and it's a lack of self-love. If you love yourself, you're going to take care of every aspect of yourself. It's going to be spiritual, it's going to be emotional, and it's going to be physical. You're going to go get yourself checked out. So for me, I feel like that is a huge problem in the Black community right now, and I think it should be addressed.
One thing really quickly I want to add to that too, because that's a really great perspective. A lot of the men that come into my practice that is lacking that self-love, a lot of times they lack that self-love. It's even the women too, but men specifically, they lack that self-love because they've been taught that self-love is actually weakness.
Yeah.
That if I cut myself, I don't need a Band-Aid. I just suck it up and just, go about my business. Well, sir, you need to put some peroxide on that.
Yeah.
If I don't, if I go without eating, then, I'm being tough. Or if I have all of these emotions and I don't express it, I just suck it up. That just means that I'm being tough. So I think it also begins with re-educating Black men that self-love is not weakness, but it's actually strength.
I appreciate that, Raynard. And I just want to kind of add on top of that, it's the socialization of men in this country in general, how we're socialized. Sasha Center, we partner with an organization called A Call to Men that talk about and unpack those kinds of issues all the time. And I really appreciate Kristal actually bringing up that medical history piece. And then they also have the trauma of remembering the Tuskegee Institute experiments and all of the issues that come with the medical system not really responding to Black people in the way that they should. And so, there is an end of both to the healing. We recognize what the issue is, but then we got to address the social stuff and the systems that exist to kind of make it so brothers feel like they can trust the system to begin with. And I know it's difficult, but self-love does look like, brothers, make the appointment.
Thank you. So I'd like to bring Kristyn, Latisha, and Dr. Teasley into the conversation. Where does this lack of self-love come from? Is it learned behavior, family environment, behavior? And you can give me some specific examples if you have those.
I think it's a combination. It's a learned behavior. I can even speak for myself. I watched my mother always go. So me growing up, I felt like I had to be superwoman too. Like I can't tell you when I watched my mom rest, other than at night when it was time to go to bed. So that was something that was learned. I don't think she taught that to me explicitly, but that was something that I learned. But also even life circumstances, going through different things in life, having to recognize, you know what, you made this decision and it wasn't the best. It didn't show, you didn't show yourself or even your children that you even loved yourself. This was a bad decision, just a flat out series of bad decisions. So I think it's learned, your environment, but also just life circumstances. And not only that, society will tell you who you are if you don't know who you are. And you begin to believe that and begin to believe, even as Black women, I have to carry this load. No, I don't. I don't have to carry this load. This is not for me, or this is too heavy for me. So I think it's a combination of issues.
I really agree. Especially with the part that you said about your mom. My mom is a phenomenal woman. And I always felt that I had to measure up to her and go further, And I didn't realize that I'm my own person. She's her own person. And it's okay if I take my own path. But for me, my lack of self-love, I believe it honestly started when I was younger. And, I come from a broken home, I guess you could say. My mom was a single mother. And I can remember at a very young age wanting the love of my father so badly and not having that. So I honestly think it started there. And I began to look for love, and not just for men, but just being accepted by family members or friends in school, things like that, always trying to fit in, and not finding out who I am. And so that's definitely where it started for me. And that's when my life began to spiral.
Okay. And I want to piggyback on something. I'm not a doctor. I'm just Coach Terese Teasley. So I want y'all to know that. So thank you for telling me you speaking that into my life.
Come on, go get it.
But I want to talk about that too, because like with my upbringing, many things happened to me at an early age. It started for me when I was 4 years old. And so when you were talking about how it starts in the home and like the upbringing of people, like a lot of people were not taught self-love because of whatever happened in their past. And so like a mother and a father that may have been going through something, and then they raise children and they're not able to be, not to say the best parents, they taught them as much as they could, but it's like, it's not a book to this. It wasn't a book on how to really teach somebody how to love, because if they never received love, how can they expect to teach somebody else what love looks like? But now in this new generation, we're learning to talk, and how the kids are more verbal. It's like, it's breaking those walls, and it's like we're being retaught and reprogrammed. So just, that's what it looked like for me, because we didn't have love. Like we loved each other, but it's like a lot of things that were hush hush, and we never talked about what real love looks like, because nobody knew. Because it was like sometimes people would revert to like drinking or smoking instead of having conversation like, I love you, I want to hug you. And so sometimes we'd be reserved and things like that. But that's what it looks like to me, because we didn't know what self-love looked like, so we couldn't expect for nobody else to give it to us.
Right.
And can I add a real quick aspect to that too? For the reason that, and I'm just learning this within like the last like 2 years myself, the main reason that self-love has been so difficult, especially within the Black community, but for Black men and Black women, is that we have to go back to see where it originally came from. Self-love goes all the way back to slavery. Back then, a Black person practicing a lot of self-love, it was punishable. If you were sleeping a lot, if you were eating too much, if you were doing any of these things that took a lot of time away from you being in those fields and things of that nature, it was punished.
Grooming hair.
So absolutely, 100%. And so that's where it comes from. We have generations of being taught that if you're sleeping, you're not going to be wealthy. If you're doing this, you're not going to do that. So we have to understand that it comes from that systematic oppression of just being taught that if you take care of yourself, then you're lazy pretty much. If you are doing these things, then you are not worthy. You should be working nonstop to get this done and especially for somebody else. And that's where it comes from. And we have to reprogram our minds to know that self-love is no longer punishable. It is a reward that we need daily.
Yes.
And can I say something about that, Raynard? I really am glad you brought that up, because at the Sasha Center, one of the things that we do with self-identified survivors of sexual assault is we have work in the garden. And so when we first started our garden sessions, literally folks would call and be like, are we really going to be touching dirt? I'm like, yeah, not only are we touching dirt, but we're growing fruits and vegetables, and we're going to be growing vegetables for the most part. And they were like, I'm not a slave anymore.
Wow.
And it's like,
wow.
How do you unpack that?
That is a very therapeutic practice, gardening. Like you are one with earth. Like it's sad that their mind is conditioned to go to such a negative and hurtful time.
And it's not their fault.
All right, but before we go out, because I want to piggyback off of that and go to Kristal, I got something to ask you, but I want to give a shout out in the chat for my viewers. Thanks so much, Mohammed, Eric, Thomas, Ashley, for tuning in to the Marnese Live Talkshow. Don't forget to share this on your Facebook page and like my page. But Eric had a comment. He said, lack of self-love comes from most Black men are not told that someone loved them until they are in a relationship. I love you is not often said on the household. You guys agree with that?
I agree.
I agree too.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Absolutely, 100%.
I agree.
100%.
I agree. Yep.
All right.
Black men are the only ones whose love is really just like conditional. It's like a lot of Black men only get love for the amount of work that they go out and do and the amount of money that they bring back in. And a lot of Black men are that. That's how they internalize their love, is for what work can I do.
Right. Yeah. And I'd like to add to that too. There is a professor, teacher, scholar, who Dr. Joy DeGrew, who's one of our advisors at the Sasha Center, and she talks about how the relationship between a Black man and his mother And sometimes if a mother shows too much value or worth to her son, that someone may take him away from her. Yeah. And so for her to just show up and say things like, oh, he ain't nothing, he ain't no good, don't worry about him, he's just over there doing, just these, the more I can degrade him, the less valuable he'll seem to the rest of the world, and then I can keep him to myself.
Wow. So, wow. Kristal, I wanted to ask you something, because you hit on therapeutic with playing in, the dirt. And that is very therapeutic. I love gardening. I can't wait to put my mulch down in the morning. With you being centered on African spiritual practices, how has this helped you with self-love? Because you may have experienced a lot of people may have experienced some things in their life. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that, because
it completely changed me. I went through probably no more than any other person, but everyone doesn't deal with everything the same way. And my bad experience was my divorce. I got married young. And just like everyone said, they give you no books for life. I had no way of knowing how to be a wife. I was a young mother at the time. It was just so much pressure, so much expectations. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I was doing my absolute best. Fast forward, my marriage ended and I was still young. I believe I was 29. So, and it just broke me completely. I had to figure out who I was, because at that time, the only way I could identify myself was a wife and a mother. So I had to figure out who was Kristal. What does Kristal like to do? When I got married, I changed my religion. I was born and raised Baptist. I switched over to Apostolic because that's what my ex-husband was. I completely left the religion whole thing completely when I went through my divorce. I started all the way over. I had to just dig deep and say, Kristal, who are you? What makes you comfortable? So when I started to research what happened when we came over here as slaves, we weren't Christians over there in Africa. So I wanted to find out, what did we practice? What did we believe in? And once I started to do that, I started to feel better. That made sense to me. That helped me grow. So it completely gave me a sense of self-love, because once I did that, I started to set boundaries for my life. If I'm having a conversation with someone and I feel uncomfortable in it, I feel uncomfortable after the conversation, I'm going to realize, hey, it is okay for me to love you from over here. Right? I don't need to talk to you, even if you are family, because people just don't understand. When you are related to somebody, that means you're a relative. Y'all related. That doesn't mean that you really have to talk to them all the time. They probably don't get you. You don't get them. They don't agree with you. You don't agree with them. Your friends, people, I believe they're more like family. Those are the handpicked people that you pick, that understand you, that love you unconditionally. They're not going to put you in a box. They're not going to expect you to be what they need you to be. And you're not going to try to conform to be that. People who don't understand African spirituality or just anything than what they're not taught is always looked down upon. You looked at as evil. If people find out you're not a Christian, why? Why am I now considered evil? Why am I now put in this box? If this works best for me and I am a good person and I am giving you love and respect, why am I not receiving the same thing? And at that point, I was okay with it, because I loved myself enough to say, this is me. This is what I like. This is what I like to practice. This is what I believe in. This is what makes me whole. This is what gives you the best Kristal. So if you can't accept that, then you can't accept me.
All right. Thank you, Kristal. I wanted to go to Latisha. You do a lot of podcasts, right? I mean, Latisha is my colleague, and she does specialize in different podcasts and talks. She's an evangelist as well. And so, switching from a spiritual, African spiritual perspective to Latisha, how, with your podcast focusing on self-love, spirituality, do you feel individuals have to be grounded in religion or spirituality to foster self-love for themselves, or it's just more so having a good family background that's instilling in you self-love? Is it both?
So kind of, I could understand what Kristal was saying. Let me back up. My grandfather was a pastor. My father is a pastor. And now I am a licensed evangelist. I joke all the time and say I probably was conceived on the church pew. That was just the way we were raised. I don't know when they had time to make me. I don't know. But so I grew up in the church, ended up married at 21. That was my first marriage. I went in with the greatest intention because that's what we were instilled to believe. You got to get married or burn.
Mm-hmm.
And got married. I knew before I got married that I shouldn't have married him. He's not a bad person. We're great friends today. But we just shouldn't have got married. After going through that divorce, because it was so devastating, because you're told so much, you got to put it in the hands of God. You got to trust God. You got to do this. It's funny because I was looking, your Facebook memories. I was looking at my Facebook memories today, and growing up as a kid, my grandmother used to say when she would teach the women's class, ladies, you better feed your husband because you don't want him eating from another woman's table. When I got married to my first husband, I thought she was talking about food. So I cooked 3 meals a day, and it wasn't until I got into the second marriage that it dawned on me she wasn't talking about food. She wasn't talking about food. But I got into the second marriage not being fully healed from the first marriage. And then it finally got to the point that marriage ended so bad that I finally was like, you know what? I'm cool off of church. I don't even have to go to church anymore. So it took me some time, some healing to identify who I was and serve the God of Latisha, not serve the God of my mother and my grandmother and my father and my grandfather. Who is Latisha's God? So I'm not debating on whose God is right. That's not what this show is about by any means. Whoever you're called to serve, that's who you serve. But I can speak for Latisha. I know the God that I serve, and it does not mean for me. Spirituality simply means you acknowledging a greater power other than yourself, that I can't do this by myself. I didn't get here by myself. And I can't do this by myself. And so just kind of going through that, relearning, unlearning, relearning, unlearning, and relearning on that journey has allowed me to help others. And so for me, I do firmly believe that you have to be grounded, because if you don't know who you are, how can you know who to take along with you on the journey? How do you know when they no longer fit? How do you know when their season in your life is up? So I believe being grounded spiritually does help. I don't believe Christianity means you're a punk. I just don't. But I do believe Christianity means that you do exhibit love. And I struggled even here recently within our city. We had a school board member that basically posted racist comments. They got him out of office. About 30 minutes up the road, another school board member posted racist comments saying, on the Confederate flag, I'm white, I'm proud to be white, but ain't nobody gonna share this because it's gonna be believed to be racist. It's like pressure. And one of the comments that I was reading was simply saying, we got her out of here, here we are for the second win for this week. And as a Christian, I struggled with, if our message is love, how did we show them Christ's love? We didn't. All we did was move them out of that position. It did not change their heart at all. Now they're just going to go to another organization with their racist attitudes and behaviors. And now we've got another fight. And who's to say that we're going to have the energy to fight them over at that organization, because we're fighting so much. And so oftentimes I struggle with, how do we exhibit love? Because regardless of what you do, regardless of how you act, I'm responsible for me. And the only way I can be responsible for me is if I'm grounded in my spirituality.
Woo. Okay. So, Terese, can people live within their purpose and still suffer from self-love? Have you notice this within your coaching and healing practices? You gotta unmute yourself.
Okay, so repeat the question. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
So can people live within their purpose and still suffer from suffer from the lack of self-love?
Yes. And what I mean by that is because I dealt with it. And so I know I deal with clients all the time, but I want to go back to me because I was in a place in my life where I suffered from not loving myself unconditionally. And so I want to go back to what the two young ladies were just talking about, Kristal and the other young lady was just talking about, because the thing is, I dealt with things spiritually. And so I had to develop a relationship with God, even though I was still ministering, talking to people, but I was suffering silently for the longest. And it wasn't until I hit 25 when I developed a relationship with God. And then I started to come out of the shell and started to see everything that I had experienced. It was a part of my journey in order for me to get to where I am today. So in the midst of me going through everything, I've developed self-love, but still was helping everybody else. Because even though I didn't love myself, I still knew I had a purpose. I knew I still had to walk. I had to speak life. I had to give life, even though everything had happened to me. But it was like a healing process, because as I was talking, as I was ministering, I began to believe what I was saying. So as people are walking in their purpose, it's like they develop self-love because they look at, or they start to believe in what they're speaking. A lot of people, I'm not going to say everybody because everybody don't, but some people that really want to be changed and some people that want to really see what love looks like, they can be healed and walk in their purpose while going through this process. So yes.
Thank you.
You're
I really want to get more into self-destruction and how we get there. And I wanted to bring in Raynard and Kalimah. And the process of having a lack of self-love, how do you get there? You know, I know we talked about learned behavior, society, internalizing a lot of things, but how do self-love, the lack of self-love, lead to destructive behavior and or abuse?
So from my perspective, and I'm glad you asked that question, just because as you were talking, Terese, you kind of like sparked me here, is that a lot of times people lack self-love and they don't realize it just because they think that the opposite of self-love is self-hate, and it's not. The opposite of self-love is self-apathy, where you just kind of numb out and you just don't really care. You're not doing anything major to like harm yourself, but you're also not doing anything to boost yourself or to nurture yourself. And so a lot of times people, and you can operate for a really, really long time in self-apathy because nothing's really wrong, but also nothing is really right and nothing is getting better. So we become just really complacent in our day-to-day life. And then what happens is in that self-apathy is that people come into our lives and then we begin to really just blur our boundary lines with people. Because we're not really doing something to take care of ourselves, we don't realize that somebody is taking something from us that we're not willing to give. And then we begin to hate them and resent them because they're a thief. They're taking something that we don't want to give and that we don't have to give. And so with those blurred boundaries, what ends up happening is people are just like stepping all over you, and you kind of feel like, well, in order for me to be a nice person, in order for me to be a loving person, I have to be nice. I have to keep giving this, because if I don't, then I'm going to be seen as this horrible or bad person. And you really get into a lot of trouble with that, because now somebody who doesn't care about your boundaries, they don't really care about you. They're not even paying attention to what's hurting you and what's helping you. They just continue to take and take and take. And now you're in an abusive relationship. And a lot of times we don't realize that an abusive relationship doesn't have to be somebody directly calling you out of your name or directly hitting you or directly doing these things. An abusive relationship is a relationship where your needs are being completely unmet and neglected while you're still feeding them. And they are just getting stronger. And then they begin to blame you because you're not on the level that they are at. And that's how you get that self-love, self-apathy, and then blurred boundaries, and then abusive relationships.
I like that, Raynard. And I just want to add, I totally agree with you 100%. And in addition to that, it is the extent to which people enter relationships already hurting, already arrived at a situation where there's expectations set between the relationship in terms of gender role expectations, how someone's supposed to act because they were born male or female, and being exposed to all kinds of media and understandings and definitions and pornography and all this other kind of stuff that's supposed to describe how people are supposed to be in a relationship. And if you have these unrealistic expectations based on what you've been taught inappropriately, or if you have also, you've come into a relationship already with a soul injury and not really able to process and talk about that soul injury and share and get help for that soul injury, then the capacity for the relationship to be violent or abusive or neglected, or neglective, or neglectful, I should say, is the high propensity for that is right there. And to be honest with you, we haven't really had the opportunity to really unpack what healthy, good relationships look like. How do we enter relationships honoring who people are without all of this outside banter about how people are supposed to perform and how people are supposed to show up in the world, being born on male or female, and it really matters across all the lines of differences. And at the Sasha Center is really interesting because what we believe in the and both. And so we have facilitators at our organization that are evangelists. And then we have facilitators at our organization who are voodoo priestesses. And we put them together and we teach them how to work with each other. And it's a possibility. And the capacity to do that is always there because we have to have the capacity not only to self-love, but how do you express and share love and make room and space for people to be who they are. And I really believe in relationships when it comes to violence, or when it comes to abuse, and when it comes to neglect, and when it comes to all these pieces, is that people really haven't had the opportunity to have a model of what healthy relationships look like, but then also they haven't had an opportunity to practice what healthy relationships look like, and then they haven't learned to have a soul deep, loving relationship with themselves. Like, who are you? Who are you showing up in this relationship? So I just wanted to add that piece to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing relationships in because we often think about relationships with men and women, but what about self-love and relationships with like our friends, our colleagues? I have seen a lot of detrimental relationships because a lot of people were suffering internally and did not know how to have like good communication with colleagues, or like I said, even our friends. But right now, I want to know, like, within your counseling practice, what you can tell us or disclose to us. What are some forms of self-destructive behavior within men versus female, right? Because
absolutely,
you hear too much from men, so I kind of want to get both sides.
So I'm gonna start off with women. One of the main self-destructive behaviors that I see that women have, whether it's within a relationship, a romantic relationship, or with their friends or something like that, a lot of times women enter into relationships trying to heal relationships from their past. They get into these new relationships, and these new relationships look a lot like the relationships they had with their sibling or their mother or their father. And because they couldn't fix that relationship with those parents or that sibling, they get into a new relationship that models that, trying to fix that. Because now if I can fix this relationship that looks a lot like that, then my self-worth will go up. And then therefore, I don't need to go back and revisit any of this, because this problem that's in this relationship, this problem that I encounter over and over and over again, is something that I conquered. I worked through that because this relationship had that same issue and I was able to overcome it, but it never works. It never works. And you constantly see a lot of women will fight back and forth with this with this pattern going back and forth with their spouse or with this friend. And what I oftentimes will sit and ask them, I'll say, you've gone through this pattern a lot. Who from your past does this relationship remind you of? And then when we get into that, then we're able to go back and begin to heal those things. And then once they work through those, they begin to develop the self-confidence to either exit this relationship or establish some firm boundaries so that they are no longer taken advantage of. So now for my men, a lot of the times that self-destructive behavior for men is that constant, well, it's two things actually. So the first one is that they don't get the treatment. They ignore what they need. If it's sleep, if it's food, if it's, just taking some time to themselves, they constantly ignore that particular thing that they really need to really survive, because they feel that if I utilize this, then in some way that makes me weak, or that means that I'm not strong enough to go without these things that I see other people going without and they're doing just fine. The other thing is, it's a kind of a new thing that I'm just really discovering with a lot of men. A lot of men ignore their inner voice that tells them what's right or what's wrong. A lot of men in their relationships where the woman is more so the unhealthy partner in the relationship, a lot of times the men will say, well, if I'm a real man, then I can take this. If I'm a real man, it don't matter if she's throwing things at me or she's, cursing at me, or she, is talking, really disrespectful about people that I really care about, or if she's just spending all of my money. I'm a man, so I need to take that. But all along the inside, they're hearing this voice tell them, this doesn't feel good. This isn't right for me. I shouldn't be in this. And they just suppress that and feel like their manhood is defined by how much they can actually take on. And those are the two self-destructive things that I see for men, is that they don't take care of their needs and they ignore their internal voice of what's healthy and what's unhealthy.
Thanks.
I want to add to that a little bit if I can. And in my work with professional athletes and working in a lot of men's space, I think that sometimes people don't give permission enough or create safe spaces enough for men to exercise emotional intelligence. How to identify how they are feeling and also look at the cues of how others are feeling, and to be able to articulate the notion that they have feelings and that they recognize that their decisions and behaviors are impacting others and their feelings. I believe that there's not enough safe space for men to be able to express that. And then I also want to say that I don't really engage in conversations that are very binary around men and women being together exclusively, because we have men with men, we have women with women, we have people together along the spectrum of identities, along the spectrum of who they're attracted to. So it's all a construct. And at the end of the day, what are the matters of the heart? What are the matters of the mind? What are the matters of the spirit? And I really think that some of the downfalls for us is that we lack the capacity or the safe space to even communicate about these things. Say that again, Raynard. I didn't hear you.
I was saying, yeah, that tolerance of being able to even recognize that there's differences in relationships, and that
tolerance, acceptance, and allowing that space to happen. Because tolerance means I'll just deal with you because you sit there.
Yes.
But there's a whole other level of engagement around that. Like there's levels to tolerance and acceptance and allowing people to be who they are. But I really believe that men don't get a chance to feel or express feelings. And I think that that's problematic in terms of them being able to self-love and love others.
Okay. So I want to go back to Kristyn. And she mentioned, you mentioned about growing up with a single mom, and how you wanted to, pretty much be her, but you wanted to surpass her. How did any of this lead to any type of self-destructive behavior, or what has been some core issues that may have led you to not loving yourself?
Core issues, I would say, it seemed like my issues began when I hit 13, 14, somewhere around there. I realized I felt different. And, I realized that I had things going on like bipolar disorder, anxiety, things of that sort. And I don't know, I fell into a spiral where I began to, uh, smoke and drink and stuff like that. And I just, I just began to abuse myself, and then the older I got, it turned to marijuana and pills and alcohol, things of that sort. So I just, I don't know. I never loved myself, and I never took the time to get to know myself. I chased happiness. I chased and chased and chased, and I tried so many different ways to be happy. Promiscuity, and just trying to be like everybody else and trying to cover up my unhappiness, and it was just all horrible, and I had to undo the damage that I had done to myself, So I struggled with all of this in my 20s and 30s, and now I'm 38, and I feel like I'm finally getting it together, Sans. I feel like I'm just finally getting it together after mental breakdowns, being in a psychiatric wards about 3 times. I was actually in rehab before Christmas. So, I mean, it's been a process for me, and then all of a sudden you think, oh my goodness, life is going so well, and then the ball drops and you're not able to handle it. You aren't able to, I never had the proper tools to take care of myself. I never had the proper tools. So I was just walking around and, blind, one failed marriage, and a marriage now that's pretty much on the rocks, and now it's like, I'm back to myself. It's just me and my children. And I'm finally devoting my time to myself and my children. I had taken no time for myself. And now that it's just me and my boys and we're here alone, I have a lot of time to think, a lot of time to pray and meditate. And I'm also taking recovery very, very serious. Recovery is a serious process for me.
Thank you so much, Sans. I said we weren't gonna call each other Sans, but that's what I'm saying. Okay, I'm trying to hold it in. You know us.
I know.
And she always the welcome word. We have our deuce, and it's always me and her. One person don't start it. Okay.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate you for that.
Oh yeah, I was just telling somebody, I think it was today. I think it was you, Sans, that God didn't put us, we didn't go through the things we went through to keep them to ourselves. Mm-hmm. You understand what I mean? It's like, once you have a story, once you have a testimony, you have to, everyone can't do it, but you have to be willing to say, hey, here's my life. I'm an open book, because you never know what your story and your process can do for another person.
Right.
And I'll keep going through hell and back if it means that I can save another sister or brother.
Breaking silence is so important about what happens to us. But not only breaking silence, and we also talk about this at my nonprofit, the Sasha Center, is being able to tell your story and also being able to listen to a story. Mm-hmm. And I think both of those together help. But I'm sorry for jumping in. I just want to say thank you so much, and I honor you.
So go ahead.
I just say thank you for sharing that. It's so important. And I think she's bringing up something super important for us to talk about, is that injuries to our souls and injuries that happen to us in childhood, if we don't unpack those things, if we don't become our own parents of our own inner child to take care of ourselves, then it's impossible for us to love others. We have to love that inner child, because when we come here, we're a blank slate. And what happens is people come and write on us.
Amen.
And sometimes they write good stuff on us, and sometimes they write bad stuff on us. But the bad stuff seems to stick.
Sure does.
It sure does.
Yeah.
I wanted to share something really quickly. There are two statements or two sayings that I constantly tell myself, because like I said, I got to the point where after 2 divorces, Tish, I'm wrong with you. Even though you're in these toxic relationships, there's something that's wrong with you. You're dating the same spirit, just a different face. And so it required me to sit down and do some self-analyzation. So there are 2 things that I get up and say to myself almost on a daily. And number 1 is the scripture that I always hear: when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren. You have to heal yourself. You have to be healed before you can fully help develop somebody else. And the way that you help somebody else is, like she was saying, sharing your testimony, sharing what you didn't go through what you went through just to sit on it.
That's
Literally,
right.
you didn't go through what you went through to just, like, you learned something from it. It was a lesson. Now teach it to somebody else. And another thing that I constantly say is, you are raising your grandchildren. I don't have any grandchildren today. My kids are 17, 14, and 7. I don't have none today, but I'm raising my grandchildren. So what it is that I'm teaching them, they're going to teach to their children. So I don't ever recall hearing my parents. I know that my parents love me. Like that. It's just that I know that they do. But I don't ever recall hearing "I love you" other than right before I got a whooping.
Didn't hear it either.
I don't. I just like, you know that I love you, but this gonna hurt you more than it hurt me. I don't recall. Maybe they did say it. I just don't remember it. I just don't remember hearing "I love you" other than right before I got a whooping. And I got a lot of those because I was bad. But that has now forced me to tell, like, my kids will be walking in and, okay, I love you. Just cuz. And my older 2 are kind of like, what's wrong with you? My youngest one, he'll say it back, I love you more. And we'll have a competition on who loves each other more. I want that. I didn't, as I'm an adult, I didn't like that as a kid. I wanted to hear that more. So I need to do that for my children so they can now model that for their children. So I am raising my grandchildren. But I had to heal me first and identify what was wrong with me, or what I didn't like, or what I was lacking. It doesn't mean my parents were horrible people. They just gave me the best that they could. I had to identify what was broken in me so that I can raise better grandchildren.
Wow. You know what? I want to piggyback off of that. That is, wow. It's interesting that you say that, because I had a conversation with my mother a little while ago. Like I said, she is a phenomenal woman, and she really focused on providing. So, you know, it's kind of like my mother was that mother and father, you know, and it's like, I don't think she grew up in a household where they said, I love you very much. And so I felt like at a certain age, I stopped hearing I love you. And so now I think my boys are so annoyed with me because I'm just like, I love you, I love you, I love you. Give me a kiss, you know, kiss me, hug me. You know, it's just because, you know, I want them to know what love looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like. And, you know, that's a part of self-love. And I also wanted to say that when we tell our story, that right there is also a healing process. It's a healing process, and it's also self-love. You know, sharing your story to another sister or brother. That's the way to love yourself.
Thank you. So
If I could,
hold on, real quick.
Go ahead.
Before we, because we're gonna be wrapping up soon, I want to make sure that we provide our viewers with some self-love tips that they can take with them, that you all can offer. You guys offered so much tonight, but I want to make sure that I give the viewers a shout out. Hey, Cat, how you doing, Humble? Okay. Sykes, Mr. Sykes says hi, Kristal. Michael, Kimberly. Thanks so much for tuning into the Marnese Live Talk Show. All right, so Raynard, go ahead and hit us with your point, and then we can go around and say some self-love tips to offer our viewers.
Okay. Yeah. So what I was gonna say was just as a man who also struggled with like self-love, to one of the things that annoyed me was when people continued to tell me that they love me, because as a man, I really didn't know anything about loving myself. So if you see young men, just really check in with them. If you see them having a hard time with hearing that word, like I love you, check in with them on their level of self-love, just because a lot of times men who get annoyed with that is not because they don't necessarily want to hear it. It's because they have a hard time internalizing and accepting it for themselves.
Wow.
So that I was just, really going to say that part. For self-love, one of my key tips is to really just do daily check-ins with myself to see just even something simple. How does my body feel right now? How does my mind feel? How does, just what is going on with me in this moment, whether good or bad? And just really be present with myself in the moment. And it doesn't have to be 20, 30 minutes, just 10 seconds, just to really pay attention to what's going on with myself. And if anything feels out of balance, to do what it is that needs to happen to get right back in balance. So if I'm hungry, make sure I eat. If I'm thirsty, get something to drink. If something on my body feels like it's a little uncomfortable or in pain, give it a little massage. Don't just push through everything, because everything can't just be pushed through.